Hey everyone, I'm going to talk all about what you do not need to know if you want to recover from OCD and anxiety-based disorders. A lot of the myths out there, I have not done a good myth-busting video in a while, and I decided as I was at the grocery store, I was thinking, what do I want to talk about that I have not talked about in a while? And I'm going to go into a deep dive on all the myths surrounding OCD and anxiety recovery, all the things that we don't need to know, and all the things that keep us stuck in trying to figure something out that doesn't need to be figured out. Before I go any further, please subscribe, hit that like button, comment down below. And if you want some coaching or webinar services, info@ocdrecovery.com. Again, that is info@ocdrecovery.com. And we will get back to you in an extremely timely fashion. Exactly. So let's just jump right into it. What do we not know? I think it's important to premise this. Everything I'm about to talk about is what we don't need to know. There's not actually a benefit that's substantial in needing to know this knowledge in order to make strides in OCD and anxiety recovery. And the first thing I want to talk about is anything related to neuroscience, neuropathology, neurophysiology, brain chemistry, hormones, anatomical, anything with anatomy, anything. So I work with a lot of people who have master's or doctorate degrees in coaching, whether they're neuroscientists or people that really understand the brain, and it aids no benefit. There's a coolness factor to it. I took a bunch of anatomy classes and neurology classes when I was in school. Really cool stuff, especially how unique neuroplasticity is. But the knowledge of that isn't important when it comes to OCD and anxiety recovery. A lot of people in the OCD and anxiety community, especially the anxiety-based community, whether it's GAD, generalized anxiety disorder, panic disorder, maybe BDD, body dysmorphic disorder, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, they hone in on how the brain works. None of that matters. We know it doesn't matter because we work with the most serious cases of OCD and anxiety, and they all come in, and a lot of them say, hey, look, I try to do this, I try to do brain mapping, I try to do that, and there is some applicability in some of that stuff when it comes to, in the knowledge of learning about rewiring pathways, but in the overall sense of knowledge to what is needed to recover from OCD, it's zero. Some of the most famous books on anxiety, which I've read a couple of them, if you read them and didn't apply any beliefs or exposures, you would actually make no progress whatsoever. But you might be able to teach a neurology class. So I think it is important to talk about that. The second biggest myth surrounding OCD and anxiety recovery is that exposures are the only thing we need in order to make long-lasting, robust recovery from OCD and anxiety-based disorders. Now, exposures are very important. They teach us how to face our fears behaviorally. They're sometimes more important than other particular types of fears, with contamination OCD, magical thinking OCD, where there's a lot of rituals, harm OCD if you're hiding knives, POCD if you're not surrounding yourself by your children. But there's a lot of ones like existential OCD, where you watch a few documentaries, The Matrix, The Truman Show, Inception, and it all comes down to the fear of being disconnected, the fear of being in a vacuum, the fear of being a robot, the fear of no connection with other people. Sensory motor, the same thing. No outward exposures are needed, decreasing avoidance behaviors. So exposures are important, but they're certainly not the entire story when it comes to OCD and anxiety recovery. I can't tell you how many people that come in on a weekly basis, that say, look, I've done a bunch of exposure therapy, I made great progress, but I still feel like I'm really stuck. It's because the person they were working with does not understand unconditional self-life, other acceptance. They don't understand breaking down fear, the fear of being stuck for the remainder of your life, the fear of experiencing anxiety for the remainder of your life, and the over catastrophizing black and white generalization that experiencing OCD and anxiety suffering is completely horrible. So until we change our beliefs about that, exposures can only play a part. And I think that's really important to cover. The third biggest myth surrounding OCD and anxiety recovery is that talking with the person you're working with and that word vomit I always talk about has substantial benefits. Now look, balance is key. Talking about your suffering with someone when you're trying to learn applicable tools, how to break down your fears, how to do exposures, has importance. But if you're just venting to the person you're working with, if you're just venting to your family members, the reality is this actually doesn't do what you think it does. Now, I know that can be really hard for people to hear, but it is very important for people to hear this. If they don't hear this, they go down the rabbit hole of, oh my gosh, I'm not making progress. Oh my gosh, this and that and this and that and this and that. And that's where that internal hawk kind of goes around in circles. So it is important to realize that you're strictly just talking about your OCD and anxiety suffering and you're not thinking about proactive behavioral changes. The reality is you're not going to see the progress you're looking for, okay? Number 4, biggest myth, and this honestly should be point number 1 by how prevalent this is in social media right now, and these big places trying to tell you that this is a problem. People are completely allowed to make OCD jokes. Okay? So myth number 4 is that people are not allowed to make fun of OCD. They can't talk about OCD in a negative light. They can say and do whatever they please. It has no effect on my recovery whatsoever. The more you think that other people can't make jokes about OCD, the more this puts you into the victim seat. And the victimhood seat, everyone can have something to complain about in their life. Every person, every culture, no matter where they live, how they were raised, can find something to complain about and be a victim about. Now, as humans, we're fallible. We will complain, we will rant about anything. We do this as humans. Even the most humble human beings will go down the rabbit hole and rant sometimes. This is what we like to do. It makes us feel accepted. It helps us get things off our chest. Not necessarily a good habit. I'm just saying it can happen. And it happens a lot when you're suffering with OCD and anxiety-based disorders. But the reality is, people making OCD jokes doesn't need to have a single effect on your recovery process. And when you're telling people, this is the analogy you want to think about. I always say, one of my favorite quotes by someone I really like says, if you can't take a topic that most people can't explain to a 6-year-old, you probably don't know the topic as well as you think you do. Because you got to be able to explain things in ways that people will understand. So I'll give you an example. Yelling at people for not understanding OCD is like going out in a rainstorm and screaming at the sky, it should stop raining. Why are you raining? Stop raining. It doesn't make any sense. Now, it looks funny and the joke is hilarious. At least it is to me, because I know the applicability of how real it is for people trying to make change. But the reality is, it doesn't matter what people say about OCD. What matters is, are you putting the work in? Are you changing your lifestyle structures? Are you decreasing your complaining about OCD? Are you changing the verbiage you use around OCD? This is terrible. I can't stand it. This is the worst thing ever. And are you slowly chipping away at your beliefs? And don't let anyone tell you that you have to yell at other people about, oh, they make an OCD joke, cut them out of your life. It doesn't matter what people say. The reality is, remember, Stoicism. It's not what happens to you in your life. It's not what people say to you. It's about your perspectives about what people say to you and your perspectives about what happens to you in your life. Excuse me. And that is really important to cover, okay? Those are 4 really good myths. Myth number 5. Let's think of a good one that there's a couple more I want to cover. I think probably a really strong myth is that medications in of themselves will lead to OCD and anxiety recovery. Now look, I'm not here, as I always say, to comment on medications. Always speak to your provider. Now there's a huge myth out there about the brain balance theory. There is no validity in that whatsoever. Same thing is true for depression. Okay, look at the biggest depression medications. We have Wellbutrin, sertraline. They do amazing things. They really help people. But we have a super high increase in antidepressants, tricyclic antidepressants over the last 20 years, and we have a super high increase in depression. So yes, they can take the edge off. Same thing with SSRI, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. Benzodiazepines can be a slippery slope. Sleep medications are things we tell people we just don't recommend them, even though we can't advise on them. Usually they become a fear proponent. Oh my God, if I don't sleep, I'm going to get worse. But it is important to realize that these medications will not change beliefs. If they change beliefs, we would have no people struggling with depression, because depression is primarily caused by belief systems. Not in all cases. Yes, there are other things inside the brain. I'm saying the majority of depression cases are caused by faulty belief systems and fear of depression, fear of being low, fear of not being energetic again, fear of losing your personality. I went through all of those because I like to be eccentrically outgoing individual. So it is important to realize that medications in of themselves usually do not change your beliefs. And I say usually 99.9999999. It's like pi, remember, it was a 3.14 infinity, just like that. But they could certainly help take the edge off. Most people I work with are on some form of medications, probably 70%. I never took medications. I always say, like Rob, probably would have helped me ease my physical symptoms, but I was a stubborn son of a bitch, and I just didn't take medications, but it could have helped me, probably, I would have to imagine. So those are 5 big myths I wanted to cover. The main thing, the summary of this video is this. Most of the things that I see on social media, most of the things I see in YouTube talks and everything regarding that, surrounding OCD and anxiety recovery, especially anxiety-based recovery, forget OCD, all the anxiety-type symptoms, are highly oversimplified. They don't make a lot of sense in the philosophical level. If you don't have a philosophical depth around breaking down fear, and the fear of experiencing anxiety for the rest of your life, it's hard to make progress. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you have any more ideas on stuff you want to see on these type of myths, please comment down below. Everyone knows I go through and answer as much as I can. Always a pleasure, everyone. Remember, info@ocdrecovery.com, and enjoy the rest of your day.